Are people with ADD more prone to take risks? Maybe you've noticed that about yourself. If you'd like to learn why that is, stay tuned. Hi, this is G.H. Glade for Coaching ADD. The whole aspect of risk-taking is almost hallmark with people with ADD, and sometimes it lends itself to a great deal of impulsivity. But let's look at risk-taking. ADD is really skewed to things like entrepreneurship, people who really forge out and take that risk to start and create something new. It is a very skewed equation when you come to looking at entrepreneurs, and there's some reasons why. And it boils down to things like uncertainty. Let's take as a premise that there is a negative bias against change and novelty. And this is true. We see famous examples in terms of the resistance to alternating current. The wars between Edison and Tesla are remarkable and famous in their own way. And this was that resistance to change, that resistance to novelty. But it's different for people with ADD. There is no more powerful drug than maybe, because uncertainty in the ADD brain leads to dopamine surge, and it is more addictive than about anything else. Carol Dweck, who's a Stanford psychologist, in her book Mindset, wrote about the mindset that leaves people open to consideration of new ideas. And this dovetails into the equation on taking risks. She identified that there are people who have a fixed mindset. Their belief is that intelligence is a fixed quantity. You have your skills. Then there's the open mindset people. They believe those skills that you have are just a starting point. And from there you take off and you acquire new knowledge and new skills. And people with that open mindset are much more inclined to go into flow states. Flow state is remarkably similar to hyperfocus, which is the other side of the coin from ADD. ADD, as we know, is not an inability to focus. It's an inability to fundamentally regulate it. And that other side of the coin is hyperfocus. I've had clients talk to me that they were so deeply hyper-focused that they looked up, saw everyone gone. It was dark outside and they wondered, where did the time go? As a psychotherapist, when I was in person in my office, I would get into sessions with people where it's like all the periphery disappeared and time really slowed down. An hour session would seem like a few minutes. There were also times working in the emergency room where I felt like I was just in that zone, that everything was just clicking along, firing on all cylinders, running on high test. And these are moments of flow and also hyper-focus. So starting point is that notion of having a growth-oriented mindset. And what allows you to push out the boundaries is that consideration of new ideas. Now, when you have that growth-oriented mindset, you're able to take feedback, both positive and negative, and do something with it. It makes you so much more open to new learning. Now, Herbert Benson, another Stanford psychologist, wrote in his book, The Breakout Principle, that there are 4 stages to this process of development of ideas. First, there's the struggle. This is the loading phase for information. And this is where stress neurochemicals start surging. These are cortisol, norepinephrine, and adrenaline. And these are the fuel for the rush. Oftentimes, people, as they enter that second stage, which is release, find that they get further in their ideas if they walk away from it. Now, what happens during release, and I have a video on intentionally letting the mind wander that kind of addresses this dynamic. I'll include that at the tail end of the video. The release reduces those stress hormones, but it also causes dopamine to rise. And let's remember, dopamine is the pleasure chemical. It's what reinforces so many different things, including drug addiction. What that release in dopamine does is it allows you to start considering other possibilities. And that is the doorway to flow. Flow, you get an even bigger dopamine surge. and it increases your ability to pay attention. Now, the interesting thing is I was surrounded by really talented people in the emergency room who had brains just like mine. And it was the kind of brain that functioned really well in that environment where you have to engage in synthesis thinking. And the ability to do that synthesis sort of thinking increases with more dopamine. It also allows you to pay attention much more closely to things. And all those executive functioning issues, they evaporate when you're in that zone of flow. It allows you increased pattern recognition, and that allows you to synthesize past things that you know and patterns that you may have seen before to recognize how to not make the same mistakes twice. Flow is marvelous. It is like a drug. It is addictive. And people will say common things when they're in flow. In the book, The Emergence of Superman, they talked about various professional athletes, extreme athletes. These were people who were surfing 70-foot waves. And there was one gentleman who jumped over the Great Wall of China on a skateboard, and he had a broken ankle. And what they will say, hey, look at that run. Wasn't that run great? Hey, that was some really great skating that I had. I was in the zone. But what they really want to say is, I felt like freaking Superman. And it is that kind of rush when people develop something. And believe me, it's kind of like a drug. Flow is an exhausting metabolic state. And then people enter into recovery where the neurotransmitters kind of normalize, where you kind of rest your head. And that's where memory consolidation takes place. We move things from short-term memory to long-term memory. Sleep allows us to do that reset as well. People with ADD tend to take more risks in general, is they don't tend to fall into that trap of being negatively biased against change. It is what I have always called a stimulus-driven brain, and it craves novelty. They are attracted to uncertainty. It's the doorway to flow. So this has been G.H. Glade. If you've enjoyed this presentation, give me a like. It gets it further in the algorithm. And if you'd like to share a story about your own flow for the benefit of other people, go ahead and write something in the comments. Other people assuredly would be interested in this. Until next week, this is G.H. Glade for Coaching ADD. Thanks for sharing this time. Bye-bye.